Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nails and Beauty Talk. I am your host, Asia the Bird. To have a very special guest with me today, he is a fashion stylist and fashion journalist. Please welcome James Sanders. Hello, James, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're most welcome. So I definitely want to go ahead and get started with this interview by asking, where are you from, and tell us about your childhood.
Okay. So I was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey,
Mhm.
where everything is for sale, including the people. Um, but I am from Camden, New Jersey, and by way of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But
Mhm.
currently, I live and work in New York. So that was a lot. You still with me?
Mhm.
Okay, good. And my childhood was a mix of the streets and church.
Mm.
Growing up in the hood, it was going to be one or two of those things. You were either going to be, in the church or on the corner.
Mhm.
So I was raised by my grandmother. My mother passed away at a very young age.
Mm.
And my father has been in prison most of my life. He's currently incarcerated.
Mm.
And I would say that the activism part of who I am, from a philosophical standpoint, a lot of that is influenced by the fact that my father is incarcerated.
Mhm.
Um, but my fashion pedigree came from just watching my grandmother get ready for church, getting ready for church myself, and,
Right.
belonging to the church. So
Mhm.
that was my childhood in a nutshell. Vintage Vogue magazines, my grandmother collected them.
Mhm.
She was an avid coffee table book collector. That's probably why I'm producing my first coffee table book. I literally just put that together just now. Wow. And yeah, that's my childhood in a nutshell.
All right, yeah, that's a really cool story, and you kind of remind me of Angelina Talley because he learned fashion style from his grandmother, and it's really cool to see that that's something in common that you and Andre have. God rest his soul. But I definitely want to also get into like what college did you go to, and what was your college experience like?
Okay. So I went to a small liberal arts college in South Jersey,
Hmm.
specifically in Glassboro, New Jersey. It was called, or is called, Rowan University.
Hmm.
There I received my bachelor's of arts in journalism, and
Hmm.
I went to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia to get my master's, a master of arts in English.
Hmm.
And at Rowan University, I was always in the journalism department, one
Right.
of two, maybe three, the only Black person in the room, the only Black student in the room. And again, these experiences early on informed the activism part of who I am and the way I was treated. And
Right.
so, with that being said, I'll just say that it gave me an early taste of politics, how a system is structured, and how to navigate that system. And that was specifically through trial and error. Education is a system. Is it
Hmm.
a system that's built to my benefit as a Black male, as a Black person? Absolutely not. But is it a system that you can manage, even master, even beat? Oh, most definitely. But
Hmm.
I had to learn the rules. And those rules are not built for me to prosper. But they can be learned and then navigated through. And that's what I had to, figure out.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, we have to learn to navigate and move a lot differently than anyone else. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, most definitely. But I also want to get into like with fashion. What did fashion do for you? Was it a means of escape? Like, how can you describe like your style?
Okay, so I would say that fashion wasn't a means of escape for me. I think it's part of our culture to
Mm-hmm.
always want to look good,
Mm-hmm.
even when we're doing bad. And throughout
Mm-hmm.
my life, there have been times where I was doing really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, my grandmother who raised me, I told you I was raised by my grandmother. She passed
Mm-hmm.
away when I was 19. And that's when I entered college.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Throughout that time, I was broke and
Mm-hmm.
I was struggling with homelessness, things of that nature. And I really had to learn, unwittingly styling and essentials, wardrobe essentials, how to get a garment and build looks off of one piece and then build several looks off of them. You know, how to style a pair of jeans 5 different ways so that people wouldn't know you're wearing those same pair of jeans, how to do black slack, how to do a blazer, what to do in a situation where you're invited to, a scholarship dinner and you have no money but it's black tie. And, I'm very talented with a needle and thread. So I'll say this. Fashion wasn't for me a means of escape. It was a means of survival.
Mm-hmm.
Fashion for me was a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt compelled to learn fashion. More so, I felt compelled to learn style because it was part of survival for me. It became
Mm-hmm.
essential.
Right.
I didn't stumble upon fashion. I felt compelled to learn fashion and the economics of style as a means to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But I definitely want to go over like top five. So what's like your top five in the fashion industry?
So I would say, and by top five, do you mean designers? Do you mean brands? What do you mean?
So in regards to top five, like your top five, designers, like who would be like your top five in the fashion industry?
Okay, so let's see. Dead or alive, I can pick anybody.
Yeah, you could pick anyone.
Okay, so hmm, I would definitely say number one, even though for me, number one, number one would have to be Gabrielle Chanel. And I
Mhm,
would say she would be number one because she was fashion's original problem solver. And
mhm,
she created garments that solved problems. She
mhm,
was haute couture's original practical designer. And when you think of haute couture, you never think of the word practicality belonging um,
mhm,
with that phrase, right? You never think of it. And so to me, the fact that she was able to blend glamour and practicality in a way that worked for her clientele, with examples such as the little black dress and
mhm,
what she was able to do with jersey and knitwear, what she was able to do with tweed, Um, during the war, she designed garments for women who had to work because their men were fighting, she
mhm,
designed pants at a time where women weren't allowed to wear them. When she lost the love of her life, the little black dress became a garment that became fully functional that you could work in. And then when it hit America, it became a craze. And now it's been recreated and remixed. And now it's an essential and wardrobe staple for every woman who wears dresses. So her presence is still felt. It's undeniable. So she is my number one. Number two is Cristobal Balenciaga, because the trends and garments that he created are still being copied and manifested today. And every designer, the baby doll dress, what he was able to, his perspective, I just don't think what he created was average. I don't think his skill and the way his mind worked was normal at all. And I don't think since his passing that there's been another one. But there was someone close, and he's my number three, Alexander McQueen. I think Alexander McQueen was someone who fashion did not deserve. I think Alexander McQueen was just wow, breathtaking. Breathtaking with his ideas, his just the way he moved and the way he, like, his idea of fashion and what that meant was not supposed to exist. He didn't believe in rules, and he broke them knowingly, and it worked. And if it didn't work, he didn't care. So I respect him for that. Willie Smith. Willie Smith was a Black designer here in Philadelphia. He is an unsung hero. You know, what he did with athleisure sportswear is right up there with Stephen Burrows, who was as brilliant as Halston. All three of them are tied to me in terms of brilliance. Stephen Burrows, Willie Smith, Scott Berry, you know, brilliant designers. And I feel like just leave that question with this. There are so many Black designers that we don't know about that worked in these ateliers that created some of these garments we're talking about that never got the credit. So let's, you know, I mean, of course there's Elizabeth Keckley. Of course there's Zelda Wynn Valdez. Of course there's Ann Lowe. But who do we not know about? Let's think about that too.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Can you explain the relationship and history with fashion activism, possibly?
Yes, I can. So, fashion, people don't think that the two go hand in hand. And I believe oftentimes that's because people misappropriate or not misappropriate, they don't take seriously fashion. They oftentimes will trivialize fashion and think that it's not that serious. But what people neglect or really don't realize, or maybe even come to grips with, is the fact that fashion, right, is wearable history.
Right.
You can tell where people were. You can tell how people felt, their emotion based on what they wore. You know, I always say that I can tell who you are based on what you wear. You know what I mean? I can tell what your aesthetic is, your personality based on what you have on. So let's talk about the 1960s, because that's the biggest example that I can give you about how fashion is based on activism.
Right.
I'm actually working on a separate project about that. And I'm talking about the Black Power movement. I'm working on a book, actually, another book, which is coming probably next year, about the Black Power movement, but told through the lens of fashion. Because
Mhm.
what people don't realize is that um, what the Black Panthers did, what Assata Shakur did, what Afeni did, what Angela did, even Huey, even Bobby Seale
Right.
did, was they uh, defied a nation, and they defied the powers that be, not just
Mhm.
through speech and through rhetoric, but they
Right.
did it through their clothes. It was the afros and beauty and earrings,
Mhm.
bamboo. It was the leather. When you're
Right.
thinking about leather, you're thinking about the jackets. They wore black leather jackets. That's a tough skin. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? They accessorized it with chains, bullets,
Mhm.
bullets that went across the chest. All of that is visual rhetoric. It's a form of what I would call sartorial protest.
Mhm.
And so it speaks to, not only am I going to say what I'm going to say, but I'm going to look how I'm going to look and give you more of a frame of reference about what it is that I stand for and what I'm not going to fall for, even more importantly. The
Mhm.
combat boots. They're called combat boots. Like,
Mhm.
hello. So, you know what I mean? The Afro is a direct, indirect opposition of what at the time was being preached to Black people in terms of trying to maintain European standards and, with
Mhm.
permed hair. You know what I mean? And going against the natural, and that
Mhm.
natural black hair meant something negative. And so the Panthers wore their afros, the men and the women. And,
Mhm.
that all black, the black meant negative and white meant positive. So they were wearing black and blue, you know?
Mhm.
They found the darkest animal they could, honey, a black panther, and they started putting it on t-shirts. They
Mhm.
said, okay, if black is negative, we're going to give you what we think is negative and make you think about it in a different way. And that's what
Mhm.
they were able to achieve and accomplish. And in doing so, using style, they were able
Mhm.
to change the perspective.
Mhm.
So yes, fashion and activism go hand in hand, because fashion can change the
Right.
way someone thinks about something. And that's what they were able to achieve then. The
Mhm.
beatniks in the 50s, the berets, I mean, I could go on, but yes.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. But I definitely want to go ahead and ask, like, how have the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd moved you? And also tell us about the book that you have called Knowledge Itself.
Did you get my book?
Yes, indeed.
Stop it. You know what? If I see you, I have to autograph that for you. You better get my book. Okay. So, yes, I know that you come on, support. All right. Period. All
Yes.
right. No. Okay. So, how did the deaths affect me? In a very large way. In a very big way. So, I'm a firm believer in therapy,
Right.
because I think that, growing up, being raised by my grandmother, she was very old school. And, you know, she was like, look, Jesus is your therapist. You need to go on ahead to the church house, which I'm also a firm believer in. Don't get me wrong. But she was like, you need to pray that away, that stress. The Bible says be anxious for nothing. And I thought, you know, okay, Grandma, I'm right. But look, I'm a little stressed now.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I started going to therapy years ago. Now, when this George Floyd and Breonna Taylor thing started happening, the world was still already because of the pandemic.
Right.
So it was very different than a Philando Castile and a Trayvon Martin and a you know, Sandra Bland. And I'm going to tell you why it was different. It was different because you still had to go to work. You still had to get on the train. You still had to drive home. You still had to take care of your kids. You still had to go here, there, everywhere. You had all these other things on your mind. Oh, but no. When George got killed, when Breonna got killed, when Ahmaud Arbery also got killed, when Jacob Blake and all these other people, okay, when these things happened, we had no choice but to sit and watch it because we were all on quarantine. This happened at the beginning of the pandemic. So everybody was home. Everybody's phones was charged. Their cable was still on. And so everybody was home watching in continuous loop the police with their foot on this man's neck and him crying for his mother over and over and over again. And so that does something to the psyche.
Right.
So, because now you're not at work anymore. You can't get it off your mind. You can't turn it off to go to work.
Right.
You're not at work. So you're just watching it over and over again. So that's what was different. With Trayvon, you may catch it on the news, but then you still got to go to work. So it's not on your mind 24/7. It may still be in the back of your mind, but with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, that footage was, you had no, like, what else were we doing at that time? Nothing. We were all on pandemic insurance. Like, nobody was working.
Right.
So that's how everybody was able to do those protests, because everybody was getting pandemic unemployment. Everybody was home. They had time. So when you trap people and then people are stressed anyway because they're home,
right,
they go outside, they can't. You compound all of those things together, okay? And then you have to see people who look like you being lynched, because that's what's happening.
Right.
What then are you supposed to do? How do you come to grips with that? So I was in therapy, and my therapist said, okay, you're a writer. You should write down your feelings. And I said, okay, let me look for a journal. So I went to, at that point, we could go outside for a limited amount of time. The bookstores were open for 3 hours a day. I spent them 3 hours going through the shelves. I was like, I got to find something. I could not find a journal that spoke to my experience as a Black person in America. And so I decided to create one. And that's how the knowledge of self A Guided Journal by James R. Sanders came to be. Hold it up again for the people. Period. Period.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. So, for the people, it does not, it's not necessarily about fashion, but I do include some cute little images for the people. But it was the best way that I could do something for what it was we were going through while relieving the stress. After I produced it, I began to feel better instantly, because I believe what I do is kingdom work and ministry. It's about it's about helping people, and it's about you know it's about changing, like, the perspective and the narrative. And so, I've got to help my people. I've got to help my people, period. Like, I just, I have to. I wouldn't be me if I didn't. And, honestly, like, I still struggle with, what happened. But I've struggled with, like I said, Philando. I've struggled with Michael Brown. I still
Right.
struggle with Trayvon and the fact that
Tamir Rice.
walking around, Tamir Rice. Like, every day as the news editor at Complex Magazine, I'm writing constantly about stories, having to do with our people getting mistreated, getting killed. I take those stories on myself. My job at Complex Magazine is to assign stories. Occasionally, I'll write stories, but I'll do an investigative feature in a minute, news feature in a New York minute, if I feel like those stories need to be amplified. Because, first of all, they're not getting done enough, in my opinion. That's
Right.
number one. And number two, no one else is fighting for my people, the way I feel like they need to be fought for.
Right.
And it's a necessary means to an end. So, with Breonna Taylor, I covered that case, adamantly, not just elsewhere, but at a publication I created, Baldwin, named for James Baldwin, one of my favorite writers. You know, I created, during the pandemic, Baldwin, and recruited Black writers in the culture and sport and fashion space, because I wanted to change the narrative of how news was being presented about our people. I didn't like what I was seeing about the protests and how the media was presenting us.
Right.
And so I created a news outlet. I partnered with medium.com, and I created a whole publication. 2 years later, it's still going strong. We have 27 writers. Shout outs to Bianca Gregg, our culture editor, Will Lyons, our sports editor, Kiana Butler, fashion editor. Just let me throw those names out there. But yeah, like, it was important to change the narrative, because I didn't like what I saw. So yeah, like the Breonna Taylor, George Floyd thing, how it affected me was it activated me, and it activated my pen.
Yeah, absolutely. Now tell us about your book, Reparation Style and Soul.
Yes. So I'm super excited about it. It drops November the 1st. It's my first ever coffee table book. And you
Mhm.
actually helped me because earlier on, I just put together in my mind that growing up, my grandmother had a extensive collection of coffee table books, and I now realize that that's probably why I'm doing that, subconsciously working on my first coffee table book. So wow, thank you for that. I always love realizing or coming to the realization of why I do things. So
Mhm.
for that. But yeah, Reparations for Style and Soul features over 8 essays written by me. And it features 90 over 90, not quite 100 um images for fashion photography, styled and creatively directed by me, using
Mhm.
all Black photographers, all Black
Right.
models, for us by us, Black hair
Mhm.
and makeup artists.
Mhm.
It's I want to say it's my love letter to fashion, but even with when you love someone, you give them tough love. You know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Right.
And so I would call it the big payback. Um,
Mhm.
and some of the essays are, about how Black people and Black culture has been misappropriated and
Mhm.
and then sold back to us at $10 on a dime.
Mhm.
And there are essays about relationships but I use fashion as the catalyst to tell every story that I tell.
Mhm.
So you'll get things about senior citizens and how Black seniors are treated, but told through the lens of vintage fashion. And you'll
Right.
get stories about um, personal finance, but told through the lens of me being followed through a famous boutique in New York that I won't mention the name of right now. And yeah, so it's very interesting. And I provide a lot of, you know, tips on wardrobe essentials and how to shop and things of
Mhm.
that nature. So I'm super proud of it. I've been working on it for a couple of years and it's finally coming out. And November the 1st, it will be in bookstores everywhere. It's a beautiful, oversized book, hardcover. And yes, I can't wait for you all to see. Oh, and I've designed a capsule collection of merch, wearable merch, to coincide with the book. It
Mhm.
The rollout for the book is very much so like a album release from the 90s. I'm super inspired by 90s hip hop culture. And I would say that that has been or that has become my aesthetic.
Mhm.
Um, you never know with me. It changes every now and then. So
Mhm. Now I want to switch gears and talk about Columbia University. So you did a class talking about like the different runway shows, specifically for Chanel, and how people can mistake the two as similar, but they're actually differences. So I definitely want to go ahead and ask, like, when you go to a runway show, what are some things that you take note of?
so yes, I did a class. I was super excited about that. It's weird to say that I was in like a teacher at an Ivy League college. That was bananas.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So thank you for bringing that up because I forgot. Other people, but yeah, when going to a runway show, I always pay attention to just the, my own personal training, I'm paying attention to construction. I want to know how the garments are made. I want to look at, whether or not there's harmony with the textiles. Do things fit well? I know that, with runway shows, the fit is never going to be perfect because these are models. And so we're talking runway shows and not photo shoots. So a lot of the pinning that we do behind the scenes, you don't get to, have that when models are on the runway. But that's what I'm paying attention to. But also the fashion historian in me, I'm also looking at trends and getting a frame of reference. What I brought up to the students was that, I was showing them a film I was showing them a clip of a Chanel film that we saw in class. And the film was produced by Karl Lagerfeld, directed by Karl Lagerfeld, and it featured a kind of restaged Chanel fashion show that Gabrielle did in the 20s. And the students were impressed by the show, of course, but I was letting them know that, the garments were remakes. So the textiles, everything, all of that, was refurbished. So I don't think the garments were actually used. The real garments were used. And we must be mindful of that, because something that's that old, it would, kind of compromise the construction, and it could potentially damage the integrity of the garment. So all of that goes into a production. Anything Alexander McQueen is that he worked on, of course, after he before he passed, is now archived. It cannot be worn again. All the original samples, is archived. It would be damaged. That's why people were so upset with what happened during the Met Gala and the Kim Kardashian fiasco with the Marilyn Monroe dress. Because, that was too much. But go ahead, girl. What were you going to ask me?
Yeah, I was going to go ahead and switch gears and talk about, in regards to influence and sensationalism, do you feel like it affected, haute couture, especially like traditional craftsmanship within fashion?
So I don't think influencers affected that. I think the economy and the pandemic did. Here's why. These last few years have been very rough, right? And so people are no longer going to, fashion is still, the industry is still trying to recover years later. And the pandemic was something that rocked not just America, but it rocked the world. So where you would wear a $30,000 haute couture gown, those events have been canceled, girl. Italy was one, for real. Italy was one of the worst places it hit. So if you were in Italy and you were going to this grand ball, you're not buying, a $40,000 Chanel haute couture gown anymore. Compared to the Italian ballet opening, because that's been canceled, sis. The people are not going. First of all, the ballet conductor probably pissed from COVID, he went home to glory. Girl, the people are no longer here. Now, I'm not saying that he really did piss or she really did piss, but I'm just, using this as an example. I don't want to get canceled now, okay? But I'm just saying, we don't know. So I'm using it as an example. The Met Gala was canceled 2 years ago. Like, where are the people wearing this couture? Everybody was doing virtual fashion shows for Fashion Week last year. Nobody was doing them. Like, where were you wearing the couture? Where were you wearing them? And people, we must keep in mind this. It takes, the reason why couture is so expensive is because of how much money it takes to produce it.
Right.
And so, and then also, you don't know if half your clientele passed away. People were dying. Most of the couture clientele, because the couture shows happened in Paris, with the exception of Pierre Moss, and I was at that show. So, if most of the couture shows happened in Paris, most of the couture clientele is European, meaning not based in the US. So let's use common sense. When COVID first struck, Italy is where it was the worst. And in China. It started there. So if that is the case, we must think of some of the richest areas. Italy is a very rich, very rich. China has its rich parts as well. What if some of the clientele for haute couture was in those places? That's half your clientele.
Wow.
In the upper room. Like, RIP. So what are we gonna like? So just to bring it back, I'll say this. Fashion houses, even your Chanel, your Valentino, your Gucci, if you follow the trends, which you Dolce & Gabbana, if you follow the trends, you'll see. I can't stand them. If you follow, and I will go on record and talk about them if you want to know why I don't like them. But let me just say this. If you follow the trends, and this will be the last thing I'll say about that. If you follow the trends, you'll see that all of the high fashion houses that have produced couture minimized that collection, or didn't produce it during the pandemic, and instead they capitalized off of the athleisure trend. And the reason for that was because people were spending more money for practical fashion because they were doing what you and I are doing, which is electronic meetings and interviews. And so people needed things from the waist up. And so they wanted to be comfortable. And so the clientele that would still spend a large amount of money on clothing did not, they were still practical about their spending. So they wanted high quality and high fashion, but they had no need for gowns anymore. So the fashion houses had to pivot, and their answer was athleisure. So, no, the influencers did not affect haute couture. The pandemic and the economy did.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. But I think also too, like, especially like with the popular, especially with celebrity, impacted the fashion a little bit. We look at, what Kanye West did as of recently, with his his collection and stuff like that. It's kind of like it's the loss of like quality, in regards to just fashion and just having that high endness. When you look at Ellie Saab or Zahir Marat, and these are haute couture, you know, houses, and they do haute couture gowns. It's just the amount of detail, especially like how you said, Alexander McQueen, you know what I mean? He paid a lot of, you know, attention to detail. So I think with popularity, it has played a part a little bit within fashion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It
Mm.
can't be denied. You're 100% right.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I definitely want to get into in regards to having our own publication. So, you know, there's not a Vogue Africa, but Africa wanted to be recognized in regards to their contributions to fashion. So, in your perspective, do you think that, you know, we can create our own publications in regards to recognizing, you know, fashion and culture through the diaspora, and especially within Black culture as a whole?
So I think that we fail every time we ask for a seat at the table that we built,
Mm-hmm.
period.
Yes.
I'll expand on that so that I can give you a little more, but it really is self explanatory. What that means is this: when the Moors of North Africa, okay, went to Europe and taught them seasonal dressing, and that's spring, summer, fall, winter. Is that not the fashion collections that we have at Fashion Week? The spring, summer collections, the fall, winter? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We struggle with a lack of knowledge of self, which is not necessarily our fault. However, that has been hidden from us and with good reason. Lack of history is how you destroy a people.
Right.
But as long as we continue to beg to be a part of a culture that was built off of trends we created or
Mm-hmm.
that originated with us,
Mm-hmm.
we fail. And so I get wanting that justification because it's
Mm-hmm.
just the way it is, you know?
Right.
Um, there we go. We needed you have to get in the door in order to make change. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, realizing that you the change like the door you built, the house you built will go a long way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I remember the first time, not the first time, but I remember going for an internship interview, and
Mm-hmm.
it was at Michael Kors, and this was years ago when Michael Kors was that guy. He was still one of the judges on Project Runway, so you know that was years ago, child.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like a sophomore in college, so we're talking
Mm-hmm.
2008.
Right.
And of course, once again, I was the only Black person in the room, and I was competing with a bunch of blonde haired, blue eyed girls. And,
Mhm.
they were wearing head to toe Michael Kors. And so um, I just, I felt so intimidated because, you know, I didn't have that pedigree, and all I had again was my training from just church. That was all I
Right.
knew about fashion. And but I was good. I was very good at what I did. And it
Mhm.
got me to the interview portion.
Mhm.
And I remember interviewing and feeling really positive about it. Of course, I didn't get it, but I remember walking out and it hit me after the fact.
Right.
What were you intimidated by? What were you afraid of? These people stand on the shoulders of your ancestors.
Mm.
And when I came to that realization, I promised myself that I was going to never be intimidated in any room, whether I was the only Black person there or not, ever again. And let me tell you something. Since 2000 and what was it, 8, I believe, that has never happened again. Ever.
Mm.
And so to go back on what you asked me about, you know, Africa you know, wanting that kind of recognition. You're Africa. You were the first.
Mm-hmm.
After everything else is gone, there will still be Africa, which was originally called Alkebulan. Okay.
Mm.
The name was changed after it was conquered by Africanus Scipio.
Mm.
But it was originally called Alkebulan, which is Arabic for the garden. But,
Mm.
let's be very clear. Africa is the first. It's called the motherland for a reason. Whether or not we want to admit it, everything comes from Africa. So why would a place that is the birth want to belong
Mm.
to something that came from it? This
Mm.
is what I mean when I say a lack of knowledge of self. We have become so convoluted to believe that we need to belong to something we created. And I have a
Mm.
problem with that. Nothing's wrong with attending these shows because I still do it. Nothing's wrong with liking these brands because I still like them. I just gave you my top 5. My first, the number 3s were all Caucasian.
Mm-hmm.
Top 3. But at the end of the day, don't get it twisted about me. I know who I am. I know where I stand. And just because I admire them, that doesn't mean that I'm lost on who my ancestors were or where I come from. And what I do know is that there very much so could have been an unsung person who looked like me in the corner, in the closet, in the cupboard,
Mm-hmm.
who might have very well have done the hard work and just never got the credit because historically that has been the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
What happened to Dapper Dan? What happened to Misa Hilton?
Right.
Misa Hilton told me when I interviewed her for Revolt TV, excuse me, when I was contributing at Revolt TV,
Mm-hmm.
interviewed Misa Hilton. And Misa Hilton told me that when she was styling Mary and Kim and Missy and Foxy and
Mm-hmm.
all the other icons who are now fashion icons
Right.
because of her,
Mm-hmm.
let's be clear, as they all have credited her as well.
Mm-hmm.
She said she went to those fashion houses and begged for clothes. They all said no, flat out. Misa Hilton went on back and she said, well, what am I supposed to do? They're not going to be naked. So she went to the fabric store and did what she had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really how Kim and Mary and Missy became the style icons they were. You
Mm-hmm.
see, we as Black people, we must understand our power where fashion is concerned.
Right.
I write about that specifically in my book, Reparations for Style and Soul. And I write about it in a piece about spirituality um,
Mm-hmm.
and church clothes specifically.
Right.
And I talk about, the idea of couture hats and
Mm-hmm.
how they're called millinery now, but
Right.
how slaves used to take straw and piece together hats and put them
Mm-hmm.
on their head because they
Mm-hmm.
were going to see God and it was their one day off and they wanted to look good on their day off. And now that's considered millinery. We must understand we are the originators of style and taste. So don't ask for a seat at the table you built. We have to stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to stop doing it.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I could totally agree because not only does it apply to fashion, but it applies to art in general, especially with beauty.
Yeah.
People understand and know internally that we're movers and shakers of style and just the whole art, because it's like, we have that special sauce that no one else has. You know what I mean? Like, especially if I look at K-pop, I used to listen to K-pop. Where did Koreans get it from? They get it from us.
Hello.
These K-pop boy bands and girl groups get the style from us, get the swagger from us, especially everybody else across the world. So yeah, it's really, really, crazy. Like, we still need to have the credit, but also have our own platforms where we could celebrate us.
There's this one Asian brand, Asian boy band that's super popular. Um,
Mm.
I had an intern last summer. Her name was Anjanae. She loves them. I don't know their name though.
Is it BTS?
Yes, girl. Them. She loves them. Like about them. And I know she wouldn't mind me saying it because she knows she is. I told her, now, Anjanae, you need to, girl. But I bring them up because of what you just said. BTS, there's a clip on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, I don't know. But somehow BTS and New Edition was in the same room.
Mhm.
BTS was bowing down to New Edition. They were obsessed with New Edition. They worshiped the ground New Edition walked on because there would be no BTS without New Edition, Jodeci, Drew Hill, Boys to Men.
Mhm.
What y'all do is cute. These little vocals, these fake little bubblegum mumble singers.
Mhm.
But New Edition, Jodeci, Drew Hill, like Boys to Men, like, right. You're absolutely right. Like, they study us. Like,
Right.
like, girl,
Right.
you wish you sounded like Fantasia, Kiki
Jasmine
Wyatt,
Sullivan.
Callie Price, Jasmine Sullivan. Like Amy Winehouse used to say, "Oh, I've studied these singers. I've studied that one." That's
Mhm.
why I liked her because she was very honest.
Mhm.
Some of these other ones don't want to do it, don't want to tell the truth.
Mhm.
But you're absolutely right. But you see, we hear that it goes in one ear and out the other. But you see, if they're telling you that, why then would you beg for a seat at their table and they are telling you that they study you?
Exactly.
So if they study you,
Mhm.
why would you want to be them?
Mhm.
And they're telling you that they want to be you.
Exactly. Exactly. I could totally agree with that.
We
But I
gotta
definitely want to switch gears and talk about fashion journalism. So you're big into teaching people how to be successful in fashion journalism. So how important is teaching fashion journalism to you, especially when it comes down to entrepreneurship?
So I think it's very important, and entrepreneurship is the way to do it now versus 10 and even 20 years ago. Here's why. Print is dying. Um, it started in 2005. A lot
Mhm.
of these magazines, these print magazines, girl, they started laying people off. People weren't paying attention to it.
Right.
2010, things got rough. The people got scared, and everybody was like, I don't know what's going on. This is a little like, I don't know. And then now it's like, okay, is this publication still out? Dag, another one bites the dust. So
Mhm.
now I'm all about teaching people, especially our people, how to be a boss.
Right.
So I wrote this book. It's called The Mode Book: How to Break In to Fashion Journalism. And when I was
Mhm.
teaching that class at Columbia University, I had them purchase that book. And
Mhm.
I taught from that book. And that book is unique because it teaches you fashion journalism, but from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So I'm so glad that you brought up entrepreneurship as a means for fashion journalism, because
Mhm.
there is a new way to do it now in a way that had not existed before. And
Mhm.
that way is being your own boss. You
Right.
know, I think the first thing to do is to LLC, build business credit, and then, create like situations where you can pull from that credit. Black ownership is so important.
Right.
It's so important. And, if you have bad personal credit, it's a way of kind of politicking around those rules. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Right.
And we must learn how to navigate this system. Because again, this system was not created for us, right?
Right.
So, since it wasn't created for us, we must learn how to work in it and have it work for us. I hate to
Mhm.
plug the Players Club, girl, but we got to use what we got to get what we want.
Mhm.
Period. Okay? It just is
Period.
what it is. And
Mhm.
so the mode book teaches you how to do that. I teach people vendor lines of credit, and what to do. I teach people, side hustles while you're building and establishing your credit, how to start an online boutique. I teach people print on demand, t-shirt lines, sweatshirt hoodie lines, you know what I mean? Uh,
Mhm.
where to find vendors for your boutique. I teach people print on demand for books and magazines, and then at the end of the book, there are all these writers guidelines for new and emerging writers with payment info, and it's updated. So,
Mhm.
yeah, like I love that book because it's practical and
Mhm.
gives people kind of real world advice. And then the best part about it
Mhm.
is it teaches you what to do if you have no experience and no writing background. So let's say you
Mhm.
were pitching a publication and they asked for writing samples, because every publication wants to know that you can write. You know what I mean? And so I teach you what to do if you have no experience. And I would tell you what that is, but girl, you gotta buy the book. That's what the people need to learn. I can't give everything away, girl.
Yeah, I definitely want to go ahead and end this off by asking, like, who has been like some of like your favorite people that you styled?
Let's see. Well, I of course had to mention um probably the person that I've styled most consistently, and that is Olumide Onijide,
Mhm.
which he's gonna kill me, only because I want to make sure I get this correct. And he's Nigerian, and I think his name means our hero has come.
Mhm.
I think that's what it means. I'm not Nigerian, okay? But I think that's what it means, Jesus. Is that what it means, Lord? I think that's what it means. So Olu is a fan favorite on ABC's The Bachelorette. Now
Mhm.
he's most known for season 18, which had a black bachelorette. Her name was Michelle
Mm.
Young. And so he was competing for her love. He made it to the top 5. And his presence was necessary because, he's a dark-skinned Nigerian, and Olu
Mhm.
is, they called him Swolu because he's like real bulky and built and whatnot. So
Right.
he like to go to the gym and work out and whatnot. I don't know nothing about that because I don't go to the gym. But and the first 3 letters in diet are DIE, and you won't
Mhm.
trick me. But he go to the gym or whatever. So, and he also was on the upcoming season of Bachelor in Paradise. So look out for that. He's also been on a couple other shows, and he's done some music videos. And so he's my favorite person to work with because he became a friend
Right.
of mine, a close friend, and I appreciate him. And he's also featured in the book,
Mm.
Reparations for Style and Soul. And I also really enjoyed working with Guillermo Diaz, who played Huck on Scandal on ABC.
Mhm.
Natalie Hall from Pretty Little Liars and True Blood. And those were my favorites, but I had some not so favorites, but I'll let them live.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. But last but not least, where can people find you on social media and how can people support your books?
Okay, so yes, on Instagram and Twitter, I am James. No, on Instagram and Twitter, you can find me at James R. Sanders, all one word. JAMESR as in radical, Sanders. SANDERS. And you can go to my website, which will have all my book info, which is www.jamesrsanders.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, James, for jumping onto
Thank
the show.
you.
This was such a very fun discussion about fashion and activism. I love how you're so passionate about, these two things. And like how you said, they go hand in hand, especially within Black culture. So I definitely thank you for this wonderful conversation and stay in touch. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to click the bell for notifications. Also, follow me on my social media platforms and visit my website, ASIATHABIRD.com, and be on the lookout for more interviews to come very soon. Take care and stay beautiful.